Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. A part of the RCMP's examination to determine whether the Prime Minister violated Section 139, Sub 2 of the Criminal Code by committing obstruction of justice, correct? That was part of the RCMP's examination.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
And paragraph 19 of the RCMP investigation report states that the strongest theory towards an offense of obstruction of justice was that the Prime Minister shuffled Jody Wilson-Raybould out of the position of Attorney General so that a new Attorney General would make a different decision regarding the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
And it's fair to say that the RCMP did not have access to all material evidence surrounding Ms. Wilson-Raybould being shuffled out as Attorney General, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
And so, just to clarify then or emphasize, the RCMP did not have access to all material evidence on the strongest theory surrounding the Prime Minister's potential criminality involving obstruction of justice, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
And the reason the RCMP did not have access to that material evidence on what was central to determining whether the Prime Minister broke the law was because of the parameters of the scope of the Order of Council with respect to the waiver of cabinet confidentiality, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. The parameters did not allow us to fully look into this one. However, I should just add...
Thank you for that. You answered it. The parameters did not allow you to get that evidence. Now, there is one person who had the authority to expand the parameters of that order in council, and that is the Prime Minister himself, correct?
I would have to say, Mr. Chair, I'm not exactly sure of the exact process of where the Prime Minister would be involved in such a decision. However, I do believe the decision has to be made within the somewhere within the government.
I would submit the decision would have to be made by the Prime Minister, but the RCMP went and requested an expansion of the scope to obtain that evidence, to follow that evidence, correct?
Before we proceeded with the assessment, yes, we did make a request for an expansion to the parameters.
I would just add, Mr. Cooper, it was not to follow the evidence, it's to glean additional information. That could be evidence.
Correct. And that request was turned down on August 30th, 2019.
I would have to say, Mr. Chair, that the request for the expansion was not allowed.
It was turned down, and it was turned down by the PCO, the Prime Minister's Department, correct?
Mr. Chair, we did receive a letter from the Department of Justice. I could not remember exactly, specifically, if this came from the...
Yeah. Well, it was from the PCO, and that's in the RCMP's investigation report. And would it be fair to say that the refusal by the Prime Minister's personal department, the PCO, to expand the scope of the order in council significantly impeded the full investigation into the Prime Minister's potential obstruction of justice?
It limited our capability of pursuing a full investigation.
And it would have limited it in a fairly significant way. Because after all, we're talking about going to the heart of the matter of obstruction.
And again, I don't know what additional, not knowing what additional information is out there, it's hard for me to speculate that there's a Pandora box out there which is full of information, so it's hard for us without speculating.
Well, let the record show that the Prime Minister's Department, the PCO, obstructed the RCMP investigation into the Prime Minister's potential obstruction of justice. Are you aware of any other Canadian who can single-handedly block the RCMP from investigating his own criminality in such an effective way as the Prime Minister?
Good question. Fantastic.
I wouldn't use the term, Mr. President, I wouldn't use the term block. The RCMP is, when it runs an investigation, it operates within the parameters and the regulations that we're allowed to. And we see international security investigation as well, where there's some information that we don't have access to, we can't use into an investigation. So It's the parameters, it's the parameters that we are,
I think the answer to that question is there is no one who has such powers. And was any explanation provided by the Prime Minister's personal department why there was this refusal to expand the scope of the order in council?
Again, Mr. Chair, as far as for a response on this one, of course, it was indicated, of course, the importance, of course, of these privileges that do exist. They are there for a reason, and again, as the Commissioner mentioned,
Well,
we do have to operate within these parameters.
It would seem to me to be part of a pattern of a cover-up.
That's right.
That's what it would seem to me to be. How can the Prime Minister be subject to the rule of law, like every other Canadian, if his personal department can shield him from an RCMP criminal investigation?
so, Mr. Chair, I'll let individuals draw their own conclusion. What I come back to is we operate within a set of regulations and parameters that unfortunately we made the effort to go and get additional information, and it was refused.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Two-tier
Thank
system
you.
of justice, I would
Thank you.
say.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.